Well, Barney,
Yes.
let me just check the level on this. I think I'm just going to turn it up a little bit. Well, first of all, I'm sorry to grab your time in the interval.
Okay, it's all right.
Let me say, it's a pleasure, as always, to hear you play again.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm glad to be here and to play for him. Thank you.
What always one of the things, many things that impresses me about your playing, is your constant energy, and the. Let me just check this.
Mr. Kessel,
Yeah.
you said you'd signed some albums.
Yeah, I will. Yes, sir. I sure will.
I'm sorry I didn't have any of your own albums. The two with
All right.
Stefan Grappelli and
Yeah, we'll just take it, Barney, because we'll be editing this.
Yeah, okay. All right.
1, 2, yeah. Barney,
Yes.
going a way back,
Uh-huh.
I first heard your playing on the albums you made with Ray Brown and Shelley Mann, which are the Pole Winners albums, which personally I still consider as masterpieces, and I keep recommending to people and turning them on to your music through them, and then I take them through other phases of
Yes,
your career.
uh-huh.
But those records in some ways seem to be quite remarkable, because it always strikes me that what you were doing on guitar at that time was really very fresh and original, and in particular your approach to chord melody playing. I just wanted to ask you, in a sense, what were your influences in terms of the harmonic side of the guitar?
Well, I really, at that point, stopped thinking of the guitar as playing a chord style, and I was thinking of trying to make the guitar sound like, at first, trying to make it sound like a small Count Basie band, and then to make it sound perhaps like a...
Sorry, excuse me. Hello? Yes? Right, I'm sorry.
I tried to make it sound like a small Count Basie orchestra. Later, by changing some of the harmonies and the textures, trying to use some of the harmonies that are prevalent in Duke Ellington's orchestrations, even at times trying to make it sound like it was Gil Evans' orchestra in certain ways, even Bill Evans on piano. I know a lot of people listening wouldn't think it, but I was thinking it, and I was thinking of using those textures. But mainly thinking of the guitar, instead of thinking of it as chord style or chord melody, I was trying to think of it in departing entirely from a guitar and using the guitar to make it sound like a small orchestra. At times with a string section with a viola and the cello and the violins, or at times just a whole orchestra. And that's the way I shaped the arrangements. That's the way I was thinking of it.
And I understand with some of those recordings that really there was very little rehearsal, and you went in there and kind of did them in probably one or two sessions.
Yeah, well, we never ever got together at some other time other than the recording session. We never went someplace to play and to prepare for the record session. I certainly had an idea what we were going to play, because really the bulk of the harmonic content fell on me with just bass and drums. But it was something that I knew. We didn't write out anything. There was nothing to write out. It really was, for the most part, it was things that I wanted to play, and they found their own parts to a great extent, Ray Brown and Shelley Mann. Sometimes I'd have an idea of what they should do, but most of the time it was not written out. We worked it out while we were there, and the thing that's different about it and records that I've made and played in, like for instance tonight, as I'm playing, it is a trio. The Pole Winners was never a trio. It was three independent people playing together, and that makes a difference. It wasn't, in a sense, guitar with bass and drum accompaniment. It was three different voices, each listening to the other and each being able to have an imagination and to supply something to the overall musical effect.
Very successfully as well.
Oh, good, thank
Part
you.
all three
Thank
musicians.
you.
But nowadays, a young guitar player taking up guitar has the benefit of not only your recordings, but recordings of many other guitar players. He also has the benefit of many books, including the book that you wrote, what must be about 23 or 24 years ago.
1967, I think it was.
Yes. And in some ways, well, that's easy for them because the process of discovery has been made by other people to a certain extent. Obviously, they discover for themselves.
Sure.
But what I wonder about, when you were getting into guitar, obviously there were people like George Van Epps around, but I wonder to what extent you were influenced by other guitar players.
Not much, and with no disrespect to guitar, it's just that I was more interested from the beginning in jazz than I was the guitar. Therefore, the guitar was an instrument in jazz, but so was the trombone, and so was the trumpet. And so I would have, even as a youngster, I would have gone to see a good trombone player rather than a mediocre guitarist. The guitar was not as important to me as the jazz form. Of course, you can't get away from playing the guitar. If that's what you do, you play it. But my focal point was not on the guitar, or to be guitaristic, or to wonder too much about whether it was the right picking or with the right form, because it was a tool to me. I wasn't really trying to expand the guitar or bring the guitar to people's attention. I was using the guitar to bring me to their attention. And so that's the difference. And while I certainly did listen to George Van Epps and Alan Roos, his student, and Carl Kress and Dick McDonough and several others who played in a chord style, who they themselves were former banjo players who had changed to the guitar at a time, just like many years later it became necessary for many string bass players to take up the electric bass. That change came about at a certain point. And
Barney, there's a young man who wants to speak to you. I think he's a great fan of you.
Yeah.
Just want to carry on with a friend.
Sorry, how do you do? Yeah. We're just in the middle of doing it. Okay, I'll be fine. I will.
We'll only give it one.
You bet. And I listened to all of these people, and I learned from them. I learned some of their solos and learned to play that way. And there came a time when, as far as harmonically, I moved away from that. Now, on the other hand, I was much more attracted to listen to Lester Young than I was most guitar players. However, there was one guitar player that I liked from the very beginning, and he really is my great inspiration on guitar, was Charlie Christian. I liked him. I liked what he did. It was a direction to me. At that time when I was playing, I was very young. I really had no direction, no purpose. I heard him and I saw there was a linear way to play. And it was not only the notes, but he played it sounded like a horn, and he had great time. Even today, I hear any number of people who are able to read through his transcriptions, but they don't begin to sound like him because they don't have that kind of attack and commitment. It doesn't sound that way. Just as there are many bands that play Duke Ellington's literature, but they don't sound like Duke Ellington. But he was a great influence on me. I was aware of Django Reinhardt, but I think I wasn't as receptive to Django Reinhardt, not because of him, but because of the bad recording mix of the two rhythm guitars playing very loudly behind him. But certainly his content was magnificent, what he did, but it wasn't as audible as Charlie Christian on the electric guitar, because he had these other guitar players playing with him, and they were playing a very chunky type of rhythm, and Django himself was playing on the acoustic guitar, harder to hear. The recordings weren't as defined, but I listened mostly I was impressed by Lester Young.
And you played with Lester Young.
Yeah. And I was impressed with Roy Eldridge, and later Dizzy Gillespie, and Charlie Parker, and early Nat King Cole before he became a stand-up singer. These were people that I had listened to and drawn inspiration from. And then on the other hand, my favorite music of all at that time, and still is really the music of Ravel and Debussy. Yeah. I mean, the first record I ever bought was the Budapest String Quartet playing the Debussy string quartet. So my interests have been diversified in that respect. I'm not a full classical music lover because there are many things that I'm not that interested in, but I certainly am interested in Ravel and Debussy. And the chords, the harmonies, were the things that appealed to me, which I really became aware of through that music.
Can I just come back on that, Barney? Because
Sure.
there seems always to be another aspect of your musical interest, which is actually the blues. And there's a very strong blues flavour that comes through in your playing as well. And I wonder how much that has to do with maybe the kind of environment you lived in
Well,
Oklahoma.
it does. In Oklahoma, I came from a city called Muskogee, and it was 32,000 people. But if you were to look up Muskogee in any international jazz directory of sorts, you'd find about 12 people from there mentioned that are internationally known as jazz musicians. And that's incredible coming from such a small place. But the fact is, many of those musicians, most of them were black, had lived previously in Kansas City, and they were aware of those influences that were laid down by Count Basie and Lips Page and Walter Page and the Blue Devils and many other Kansas City musicians during the 30s, the late 20s and the early 30s, where it was a real mecca for music, for jazz. And of course, when I came along playing at the age of 12, and by the time I was 13 and a half, I was playing with many of these black musicians in Oklahoma, and that's where I learned about the blues. I didn't learn it from a music school or intellectually. I mean, I grew up with that kind of a feeling. And it's a jazz blues feeling. It's not a rock or a country or rhythm and blues. It's a jazz feeling. I mean, at times it involves simple harmonic changes, other times they are more sophisticated, but it's blues with a jazz feel. And as a matter of fact, most of the players that I know that I admire from that period, they have the blues in them, no matter what they're playing. I mean, when Charlie Parker played, it didn't matter what he played. It could be a song by Cole Porter, but he played it with a blues flavor. There was a blues injection in the way he played it.
Yes. Now, you made the point just now that you learned really from the source, from the musicians that are around and the kind of, if you like, the living culture of the music.
Yes.
Now, would you say nowadays it's slightly harder for younger musicians to actually, if you like, be in the melting pot while the brew is being made?
Well, it's difficult to grow up and to be in that environment. That environment is rarer today. It's not that much around, and there are not that many musicians that are trying to play this way. There are not that many musicians who have a commitment to put the music first over money, and so you find many people who are really skilled in music, but their tastes are diversified. They don't have any particular strong emotional feeling about this. They like rock, they like rock pop, they like fusion, they don't mind certain little things. They may even have a classical background, and they're more diversified rather than having grown up with a strong commitment to a particular approach to music. And with it all, because of the times and just the way things are, and music being such a big business today, any number of people put first considerations towards what can they do to make a lot of money. And that was not the case in those days. Some of it back in the days in the 20s and 30s, it was that the people were more dedicated. But another is that besides all that, the great big money salaried players did not exist. It wasn't there for them to aspire to. So some of it, as I say, they were dedicated, and others didn't do it because they just it wasn't available.
Looking at guitar then, I mean, do you see that tradition, or that particular tradition of jazz, as a dying tradition, or do you see younger players coming up in a sense who are taking the mantle?
It's mostly dying. There are a few, but very few, because if it were only a matter of technique, if it were only a matter of just being all over the instrument and being diversified, But it's the subtle part. In other words, it's the idea of playing. One of the things that's mostly missed is there are players with fantastic technique, but when they play, they have no time. There's no time, and there's really very little taste in this kind of music. It's almost as though they know the guitar very well, but they don't know the subtleties of this music, because maybe it isn't anything personal to them. It's something that they learn, and they don't have any greater emotional depth for it than playing behind the Jackson 5 or playing a date for a dog food commercial. It's something they like and they want to learn, but they're not really in love with it. And they easily demonstrate that they don't really understand the values of it. Whereas most of them are really what I would call very developed instrumentalists, but they're not jazz music. They really don't know what jazz is about, a lot of them. And when they play, most of them don't exhibit good taste, and the ones that do are, in a sense, copying other players. They're in someone's bag. They're not themselves. I mean, if you listen to Sarah Vaughan, you can tell it's Sarah Vaughan. If you listen to Louis Armstrong, you know Sarah. Well, I listen to a lot of people play today that they play well, but they sound like 3 or 4 people combined, because I don't hear them in it. They're doing what Wes Montgomery would have done or what Joe Pass did, but they're not doing themselves. Yes. For the most part. There are a few exceptions, but very few.
And you're also, I mean, in addition to being a performer, you're also known as an educator. You've been giving seminars called the Effective Guitarist for many years now. And how do you tackle that issue in those seminars, Barney?
I try to stress individuality. I try to stress learning through influences rather than imitation. I try to point out what the difference is, how to be influenced and to suggest an influence and grow from these influences, which we all must do. Nobody is born knowing all these things, and we've all gotten it somewhere. But to get it in such a way that what you get transforms and mixes with you, so that it comes out you subject to this experience rather than simply mimicking someone. If a classical guitarist was playing quite well, but then all of a sudden they had an opportunity to study with John Williams or with Andres Segovia or Julian Bream, you would hope that that study, that time they put in, would be evident in their playing, that something was there that wasn't there before. But what is there is still them. It's not the idea that they're copying these other people. And I do stress that the seminar itself is made up mostly of sessions dealing with the most common questions guitar players have, but not skipping about and at random just flitting from one thing to another. But for instance, maybe a 2.5-hour session with little breaks, and all you're talking about is how to read music, how to sight read music, and develop a sight reader. There may be another 2.5-hour period where all you're talking about is how to improvise. Another one might be how to begin to develop some kind of a way to alter the harmonies and to establish chord substitutions. Another might deal with improvising. Another might deal with accompaniment. But they're the problems that are most prevalent, and instead of flitting around with it, I deal with it in detail as best as I can from my own experiences.
Yes.
Yeah.
Good. And just one final question, Barney, before I release you. And that is this, that in the discussions I've had with various of the leading American guitar players, I've asked them really how they learn, how they study, and the one thing that is clear is that the last thing they did was sit down and play the scale of G major over and over again. They seem to actually say, right, I hear this music in my head, and I play it.
Yes.
And in a sense, the more formal side of guitar doesn't kind of exist for them. If you follow what I mean. And I'm wondering if this applies to you as well.
Absolutely, it does. Yeah, it does. It's not that you don't know these things, it's not that you haven't studied these things, but they are really not any part of my experience at this time. When I play the scales, it's really to get more dexterity at the moment, and to also sort of momentarily gain a familiarity of the fingerboard. But it is not to make music. The way I liken it is playing a scale is like going through an alphabet. It doesn't make sentences. And it's also like for a boxer to be skipping rope and punching a bag. But when you go into fight, you don't skip a rope and punch a bag. There is really no vitality in scales musically. It's not music. It's not music. What it is it's a group of notes arranged in a particular sequence. but it has nothing to do with music. Music is made up of memorable melodies, and any memorable melody has a rise and a fall. It is composed of periods where there is a rest, periods where there are whole notes, half notes, 16th notes, a mixture of various times, a mixture of pitches. It moves upward in a fashion, and then it drops down, and then it recovers, and there's a sweep, there's a rise and fall. If it were on a graph, it would be showing constantly rising and falling, and in some ingenious, beautiful way that there are many melodies that are so haunting that to the human soul, they've been around for hundreds and hundreds of years because they really grab the human psyche. This is music, along with harmonies and along with rhythm. So when you sit down and play a scale, it's almost like asking someone to get up and be as eloquent as Winston Churchill. And he gets up and he says A, B, C, D, E, F, G. I mean, there's nothing to it. And the other thing is the thing that's almost completely overlooked in all formal academic training regarding improvisation is they don't talk about spontaneity. They don't talk about inspiration. They don't talk about creativity. They don't talk about something welling up in you at the moment that never welled up that before. And the fact that you're playing with certain people, and the fact that you're emotionally involved in a song, and that it draws something out of you. It's rather learning a bunch of devices, learning the modes, learning 12-note serial writing, learning what John Coltrane did, what this one did, and then you do it in a premeditated way, which has nothing to do with improvisation. I mean, people get together to improvise, and what they do is many times play things that they have worked out. Now, where's the improvisation? And another thing is playing along with records, and rhythm records is like making love by mail. It has a little of value. It has a little value, but these are all synthetic experiences. It's almost as if we got involved in a 6-week course in swimming, and we spend the first week going to Harrods and picking out swimming trunks, and then we go and we talk about the water and the temperature, and we talk about what kind of a cement should be in it, and we do everything, but we never dive in and swim. We never dive in and swim, and people lose sight of it's almost like with all of the things that most players do, and not just only guitar players, but with all that they do to try to learn jazz, they never stop to think in terms of what did the masters do to produce jazz. And what they didn't do is they didn't go to a school to learn it. They didn't do that. And they didn't play along with accompaniment records, and they didn't do a lot of transcribing. I mean, some of it is good. It is good. All of it is good to help. But really, in the final analysis, you hear a song, or you even hear a chord. You just hear a chord. Without intellectualizing what it is, you sense and feel the flavor. Just as if you were in a restaurant, you smell something, it smells good, you want to eat it, but you don't have to analyze to know whether it has sugar in it, or whether they put chili powder in, or whether it's got green beans. You just smell it and you like it. And this is the part that is lacking in the music. So people have a scholarly approach to jazz. It's intellectual. It's all there except the feeling.
Barney Kessel, many thanks.
Thank you.
Thank
Pleasure
you.
to be with you.
Yeah. Barney, that was tremendous.
Good.
Thank you very
Good.
much indeed.